Time and time again, we're seeing it happen with no repercussions.
There's a lot of hidden stress in football.
It can be quite intimidating, especially as someone who's quite openly gay.
For many years now, football has been marketed as everyone's game, but there is no hiding from the game's uncomfortable relationship with sexuality in this country. Fan activism in football has led to the creation of many LGBTQ supporters groups. One of these groups is Marching Out Together, a group who are embracing sexuality and looking to build a more inclusive and supportive atmosphere for football supporters.
I think for me, joining Marching Out has certainly made attending the games a little bit easier. So obviously meeting with people that before a game, it makes it quite not so intimidating. I used to go to games on my own at times, and walking into that ground, there's 37,000 people. It can be quite intimidating, especially as someone who looks quite openly gay. I was at Ellen Road and I was in a part of the ground that's notorious for being our sort of loudest, most leery. And Patrick Bamford went down injured, and the guy a couple of rows behind me started chanting, "Get up, you puff." And unfortunately, the way the steward dealt with that was to come and speak to the guy and then sit next to me for the rest of the game, which made it blindingly obvious who had reported him. And it's one of the only times I felt intimidated in Ellen Road. I didn't feel safe. Whereas we've had a really positive experience in two away games, which are actually, it's our stewards most of the time that go away. So the first time we heard it was at Burnley, reported it subsequently to the club, and the guy, was a really young guy, he'd only just turned 16, was brought into the club and basically asked to explain his actions. And we've got a policy, we don't want anyone banned, we want them to learn from it. So he was taught to explain why it's offensive, how I felt hearing it, because it was the same word again, and the word faggot as well was used. So yeah, that was really positive. The club basically said, you do it again, you're going to get a ban, but this time we want you to apologise and realise why it's offensive.
Whilst the men's game continues to tackle their own issues with sexuality, the women's game is far more transparent. With openly gay players and coaches, the juxtaposition between the two is noticeably clear. To find out more, I spoke to esteemed journalist and author Michael Calvin.
It is much more accepted, and it is interesting that the culture. There's a culture of normality about it, and it hasn't. The thing about women's football, it hasn't got that sort of testosterone urge or rage, has it? There've been issues arisen where when relationships have broken down, there was one example where basically they didn't want to pass to one another. People like Pernille Harder and people like that, they stress the positive. In men's game, there is the accentuation of the negative, and it's just a reflection of the difference between the sexes, the intrinsic difference between the sexes, but also I think the emotional maturity of women. There are still alpha women in dressing rooms, because any dressing room in any sport is a very, very competitive environment. But as I say, there's much more emotional maturity and much more, I suppose, emotional intelligence, because the problem with male dressing rooms is that there is a herd mentality going on. There's certainly in men's professional football, there is a suspicion, well, not a suspicion, there is a suspicion of any hint of vulnerability. You've got to be the big macho man in the center of the dressing room, beating your chest and say, "I'm wonderful," and trying to do down other people by the force of your personality. Well, that's a pretty unhealthy environment, and you do get there's a lot of hidden stress in football, in men's football. So you've got this testosterone, you've got the dreaded B word, banter. It's not a very healthy environment. And it's, again, very interesting talking to Emma, that, you know, she speaks to senior players, senior male players, and also male coaches who are uncomfortable with that environment in the male game, because, you know, she was saying that some people, some males in football come to her and say, look, I'm uneasy objectifying women, which in the way that they are within, you know, the typical male dressing room. I'm uneasy with, you know, they take the piss out of me because I tell them I love my wife, you know, stuff like that. And it's overgrown boys club stuff, you know.
It's been over 30 years since Justin Fashanu became the first openly gay professional footballer in this country. The homophobic abuse and overwhelming media attention that followed Fashanu amid sexual assault charges led to the 37-year-old taking his own life. In 2021, Sheffield United defender Jamal Howlett-Mundell became one of the first openly bisexual footballers in this country for decades, and he's hoping that he can become an example to other young gay or bisexual athletes.
It was something that I wanted to do for such a long time. So I joined Sheppey in January 2020, and in one of my initial conversations with the management team before I joined, I told them about my sexuality, and I said, look, I'm not going to come if you're not comfortable with it, or if you believe that the players won't be comfortable with it. And the manager, the assistant manager at the time, they just basically said to me, look, like, be who you are. We want you. Doesn't matter about your sexuality. If you want to go and tell the rest of the boys, then that's completely up to you. We'll leave that in my hands, essentially. So I just waited and waited. And then I wanted to do it quite soon after joining because I really enjoyed the group and I was getting on well with everyone. And then lockdown started, like, there was whispers about lockdown. So I was like, oh, should I like do it now? If I do it now, then like, I'm not going to see the boys for ages. So in March 2020, just before we sort of got sent into lockdown, I spoke to a few of the boys that I traveled with, so in our car school, and I basically told them, and they were like, oh, like, well done, you know, like, it's something that they haven't heard from a teammate before or about anyone really in football that's close to them. So they were like pretty pleased that I was comfortable enough to share with them. But of course, I'd spend so much time with them, not only in the journeys, but also training, playing, you know, like we'd go out. So after that, I was like, okay, that's like giving me a lot of confidence, you know? So I then thought I'll do it when we come back to football. So I think we went back to football in June last year, June, or I think it might have been early July. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then I just basically melted. And I was like, no, I'm not ready. You know, I'm not ready to speak to them about it. Speak to the rest of the boys that is about it. So delayed it. And then we went into another lockdown and then another lockdown. And it was like, when am I going to do this? You know, because I really want to. And at that point I was starting to like bubble inside, and then the fear started to grow because I'd already started my journey, and then I felt as though I was sort of retracting. So it was just like speaking to the boys that I already knew and basically like consoling them and saying like, what do you guys think? And they were like, look, the boys are going to be sweet. And to be honest, one of my closest teammates, he had said to me that most of the boys know already. So I don't know who he was that spoke about it. But after he said that, I sort of like realized if they know already and they haven't spoken to me about it or they haven't said anything negative, then like they're fine with it. What I say is that I hid for a very long time, and I still do have like tendencies of hiding that I'm trying to overcome myself. But for younger athletes, especially in the professional game, I mean, it depends on how young we're talking. If we're talking under 16s and below, where you still got the pressures of school, you've got the pressures of, am I going to get my scholarship? Am I going to get my pro deal? And you have to sort of balance school, home life, social life, football. And then when you go into under 18s, for example, where you are full time, you're training 5 days a week, you've got a match. And you don't have to really think about school anymore. You don't have to think about what is it my friends that I'm with every day are thinking and what are their friends thinking. It's more a case of I'm here for my sole purpose, which is to be a football player, you know? So hiding was something that I sort of found solace in, but also I didn't enjoy because then I couldn't be myself and I didn't feel as though I could go to particular places with particular groups of people because of what I know that they don't agree with. So I do understand why like a lot of young players may feel the same, those that are in the same or similar position as myself.
Whilst increased commercialisation, big money transfers and the constant focus on evolving the game continue to be the focus for many within football, it's time to take a deeper look at the core of the sport we know and love, to fight all forms of discrimination, to challenge the experiences within grounds and online, and heal the beautiful game, not for few nor many, but for all.